Ever get that like 3 p.m. slump? Or can't sleep at 2 a.m.? Makes you wonder what's going on, right? But like, how does our body know what time it is?
Yeah, our bodies are amazing, huh?
Well, today we're going to like dive deep into this research article from the Embio Journal
Oh, cool.
about this protein, EZH1. It's like our internal timekeeper. Crazy, right?
EZH1, huh? Never heard of it.
Me neither until I saw this study. But basically, it makes sure all those processes in our body, sleep, metabolism, even like muscle repair,
Yeah.
they all happen when they're supposed to.
So it's like the conductor for our body's orchestra.
Exactly. So instead of having one big clock in our brain, it's like we have tiny little clocks in every cell.
At the genetic level, wow.
And EZH1 is like the key to making sure those clocks are all in sync.
Fascinating.
So one of the things it does is regulate this thing called RNA Polymerase II.
Okay, now you're going to have to remind me what that is.
Yeah, so RNA Polymerase II, it's like the machine that reads our DNA and then makes RNA, which is basically the blueprint for making proteins.
Right. Proteins, the building blocks of, well, everything.
Exactly. So making sure those proteins are produced at the right time is super important.
Makes sense.
And that's where EZH1 comes in. It keeps the whole process on schedule.
Like a foreman in a factory making sure everyone clocks in on time.
Yeah, kind of. But EZH1 does even more than that. It also modifies this thing called chromatin.
Chromatin. It rings a bell.
Think of it like the packaging for our DNA. It's all organized, so the right genes can be accessed at the right time.
Right, like a filing system.
Yeah, and EZH1, it can like add or remove these chemical tags, sort of like putting sticky notes on different sections of the DNA.
To mark which genes should be turned on or off. Clever.
Exactly. It's like EZH1 is both the foreman and the librarian, right? Making sure the right instructions are available when the cell needs them.
That's a great analogy. And by doing all of that, EZH1 keeps our genes running on a schedule, right? Keeping our bodies in sync with our circadian rhythms.
Yeah, it's like a whole symphony going on at the microscopic level.
Amazing how it all works, isn't it?
So how did scientists figure all of this out? It seems like a pretty tough thing to study.
Well, researchers have been interested in EZH1 for a while. And there was this really interesting study led by a team at KAUST. They decided to look specifically at skeletal muscle tissue in mice.
Oh, interesting. So why muscle tissue? Just because it's easy to study, or is there something special about muscles?
Well, skeletal muscle, is really influenced by those circadian rhythms.
Like how our energy levels change throughout the day.
Exactly, and even like our physical performance. So it was a good place to start to see how EZH1 might be involved.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So they took these mouse muscles, and they tracked, the gene expression and the protein activity over a 24-hour cycle. Both in living muscle tissue and in those muscle cells they grow in the lab.
Okay. So they were basically watching EZH1 in action, seeing how it changed throughout the day.
Exactly. And how it affected what all those other genes were doing. They wanted to see how everything was connected.
Like putting the cells under surveillance, huh? So what did they find?
Well, turns out EZH1 levels, they go up and down in a very specific pattern throughout the day.
Really?
Yeah. And those changes, they directly impact how thousands of other genes are expressed.
Wow, it's not just keeping time, it's like conducting a whole orchestra.
Exactly.
So, but what happens when EZH1 isn't working the way it's supposed to? So like what kind of problems happen? Is it just, feeling tired, or is it worse?
In the muscles, when they mess with EZH1, the muscle repair got all messed up.
Huh, so that's why I'm sore after working out maybe.
Could be, yeah. If the timing is off for muscle growth and recovery, it can definitely make you sore.
But what about the rest of the body? You said EZH1 affects a ton of other genes too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So those genome-wide analyses. Well, messing with EZH1 messed up the rhythms for over 1,000 genes.
Wow, 1,000.
Seriously. And a lot of those genes, they're involved in metabolism and, cellular repair all over the body.
Whoa, so it's not just muscles we're talking about, like how our body uses energy and heals itself.
Exactly. Like at the most basic level.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling. Researchers even found a link between messing with EZH1 and, getting age-related diseases easier. Like if your internal clock is out of whack, it makes you more vulnerable as you get older.
Yikes. So did they just study the problems? Or did they try to fix anything?
Oh, they tried to fix it. That's where it gets really interesting. When they restored EZH1, everything kind of went back to normal. Like the rhythms were back in sync.
So like restarting your computer when it freezes?
Yeah, kind of like that. It means we might be able to, develop therapies that can target that EZH1 pathway. Like imagine resetting your body's clock if it gets messed up.
That would be amazing. Like no more jet lag.
Maybe. Or even like shift work, people working nights and stuff.
Yeah.
But think bigger, too. What about treating more serious conditions? Things that are caused by circadian rhythm problems, metabolic disorders, sleep disorders, maybe even neurodegenerative diseases.
Well, are you talking about Alzheimer's?
It's too early to say for sure, but this research is a huge step. Now we understand how these clocks work a lot better, and how if they get messed up, it can lead to disease. And that's how you start to develop new treatments.
Man, I was a little skeptical at first, I have to admit. EZH1, what even is that?
Yeah.
But now I see how important it is. Like, this little protein is controlling our health and well-being in ways we never imagined.
It really shows how connected everything in our bodies is, right? Like one small change can have huge effects everywhere.
For sure. And we're just going about our lives totally unaware of all this stuff going on inside us, these like little conductors keeping everything in time.
Exactly. And it shows you why basic research is so important. We wouldn't even know about EZH1 without scientists studying these like basic processes.
Totally. So, big picture, what's the main takeaway from all this? What should people remember about EZH1?
Well, I think it's this. EZH1, most people have never even heard of it, but it's super important for keeping our body's clocks running smoothly. And those clocks affect way more than just when we sleep.
Yeah, it's like EZH1 is a control freak, but in a good way.
Right. It wants everything to run perfectly.
Yeah.
So what about you? What are you most curious about now? What other research would you want to see on EZH1?
Yeah, it really is like a whole secret world, right? Like inside every cell, these little proteins are making sure everything runs on time.
And with EZH1, we're just scratching the surface. Think about it. What if we could figure out exactly which genes get messed up when EZH1 isn't working right?
Oh, so we could like develop super specific treatments?
Exactly. Target those problems right at the source.
So instead of just treating the symptoms, we could fix the actual problem at the genetic level. That's wild.
It is pretty amazing, but there's a lot to consider too. Like what if, you try to fix one thing and accidentally mess up something else?
Yeah, there's always that risk, right? Like with any powerful tool, you got to be careful.
Especially when you're talking about something as fundamental as our internal clocks. Yeah. We need to understand all the little details first.
Yeah, can't just go around messing with our genes without knowing what we're doing.
Exactly. It's not just about the science, it's about the ethics too. As we learn more about EZH1 and what we can do with it, we need to talk about how to use that knowledge responsibly. Like, what are the risks? What are the benefits? It's a big conversation.
Definitely a lot to think about. But I have a feeling EZH1 is going to be a big deal. Like we're just at the beginning of all this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so much more to learn. Who knows what other secrets EZH1 is hiding?
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been great talking about this with you. Hopefully our listeners are just as interested in EZH1 now.
And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to make the next big discovery, right? So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those internal clocks ticking.